You think happiness is something that happens to you? That's the lie we've all been sold. Wait for the right job. Wait for the right person. Wait for life to get easier. And then, maybe then, you'll be happy. But here's what no one tells you. Life doesn't get easier. It gets different. The problems change, the pressure shifts, but the weight never really lifts. So if you're sitting around waiting for the perfect moment to be happy, you're going to be waiting forever. Happiness isn't a destination you arrive at when everything finally aligns. It's a decision you make in the middle of the mess. It's a choice you force yourself to make even when everything in you wants to stay bitter, stay angry, stay stuck. And that's the part that scares people. Because it means happiness is your responsibility, not your circumstances. Not the people around you, yours. Most people don't want that responsibility. They'd rather blame life, blame luck, blame other people for why they're miserable. But the ones who actually find peace, they're the ones who stopped waiting. They stopped making excuses. They pushed themselves to be happy even when life gave them every reason not to be. That's not toxic positivity, that's survival. That's strength. And if you've been suffering longer than you needed to because you thought you didn't deserve to be happy yet, this is your permission to stop punishing yourself. You probably can't remember when it started feeling this heavy. When life went from something you were excited about to something you were just trying to survive. Maybe it was gradual, a series of small disappointments that piled up until the weight was too much to carry. Or maybe it was sudden, one big loss that changed everything. Either way, somewhere along the line, happiness stopped being your default. It became something you had to fight for. Something that felt out of reach. And the worst part? You started to believe that maybe it was supposed to be that way. Maybe you were one of those people who just didn't get to be happy. Maybe you'd had your share of good days, and now it was time to just accept that life was hard. But that belief? That's the trap. Because once you convince yourself that happiness isn't for you, you stop trying. You stop looking for the good. You start doing the things that used to make you feel alive. You settle into this grey existence where you're not really living, you're just going through the motions. And people tell you to be grateful. They tell you it could be worse. They tell you to focus on the positive. And you want to scream at them because they don't understand. They don't know what it feels like to wake up every day with a weight on your chest that won't go away. They don't know what it's like to smile for other people while dying inside. They don't know what it's like to try so hard and still feel like you're failing. So you stopped trying to explain it. You stopped asking for help. You just kept moving, one foot in front of the other. Because that's what you do. That's what you've always done. But here's what you didn't realize at the time. Every single day you kept going, even when you didn't want to. You were building something. You were building resilience. You were proving to yourself that you could survive. And survival, as unglamorous as it sounds, is the foundation of everything that comes next. Because you can't rebuild a life if you don't make it through the collapse first. And maybe one day something shifted. Maybe it wasn't a big moment. Maybe it was just a morning where you woke up and decided you were tired of being miserable. Tired of letting life beat you down, tired of waiting for permission to feel good again, and you made a choice. Not to pretend everything was fine, not to fake positivity, but to push yourself toward happiness even when it feels impossible. Even when every part of you wanted to stay angry, stay hurt, stay stuck. You decided that you deserved to feel good again, not because life gave you a reason, but because you were still here, still breathing, still capable of more than just surviving. It wasn't easy. It still isn't, because life didn't suddenly get easier just because you decided to be happy. The problems didn't disappear. The pain didn't vanish. But something inside you changed. You stopped waiting for life to give you happiness. You started creating it yourself. You started doing small things that made you feel a little lighter. You started protecting your peace instead of giving it away. You started saying no to things that drained you and yes to things that filled you up. And slowly, piece by piece, you started to feel like yourself again. Not the version of yourself that existed before everything went wrong. A stronger version. A version that knew how to find light even in the darkest places. That's where everything started to change. You know what keeps most people stuck? They're waiting for the storm to pass, waiting for life to calm down, waiting for the day when everything finally makes sense and happiness just shows up on its own. And while they're waiting, years go by, actual years. And they look back and realize they spent all that time in a holding pattern, convinced that one day things would get better and they'd finally be allowed to feel good. But that day never comes. Because life doesn't work that way. Life doesn't pause and give you a break just because you've had enough. It keeps moving. It keeps throwing things at you. And if you're waiting for perfect conditions to be happy, you're going to spend your whole life miserable. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Happiness isn't a reward for getting through the hard times. It's a tool you use to get through them. It's the thing that keeps you sane when everything's falling apart. It's the anchor that reminds you why you're still fighting. But you have to choose it. You have to decide that even though life is hard, even though you're tired, even though you have every reason to be bitter, you're going to find something to smile about anyway. And that decision feels impossible at first. Because when you're in pain, happiness feels like betrayal. It feels like you're pretending, like you're lying to yourself, but you're not. You're just refusing to let the hard times define your entire existence. Think about the people you know who've been through hell and still manage to laugh. Still manage to find joy in small things. They're not delusional. They're not ignoring their problems. They've just figured out that suffering doesn't require their full attention every second of every day. That it's okay to take a break from the weight. That it's okay to feel good even when life isn't good. And that permission, that ability to separate their circumstances from their emotional state is what saves them. Because the weight of waiting, the weight of believing you don't deserve happiness until you've earned it somehow, that weight will crush you. It'll steal years you'll never get back. And for what? So can you prove to yourself that you suffered enough so you can feel justified in your misery? That's not strength. That's self-destruction. But here's where it gets tricky. Even when you decide to push yourself toward happiness, there's this voice that shows up. It tells you you're being selfish. It tells you that you don't have the right to feel good when so much is wrong. When people are depending on you. When problems are still unsolved. When the world is a mess. And that voice is loud. It makes you feel guilty for laughing. Guilty for taking a break. Guilty for doing anything that isn't productive or noble or self-sacrificing. And if you listen to that voice, it'll keep you stuck forever. Because there will always be something wrong. There will always be a reason to feel bad. There will always be someone worse off than you. And if you wait until everything's perfect to let yourself be happy, you never will be. You have to give yourself permission. Permission to enjoy a moment even though the rest of your life is chaos. Permission to feel proud of small wins even though the big goals are still far away. Permission to rest without feeling like you're wasting time. And that permission doesn't come from outside. It comes from you. From deciding that your mental health matters, that your peace matters, that your happiness isn't a luxury you have to earn, it's a necessity you have to protect. Because if you don't, if you keep running yourself into the ground, trying to fix everything before you allow yourself to feel good, you'll burn out. And when you burn out, you're no good to anyone, not to the people who need you. not to the goals you're chasing, not even to yourself. Imagine this. You're working on a big project, something that matters, and it's taking forever. Every day you're grinding, and every day it feels like you're barely making progress, and you tell yourself, I'll be happy when this is done. I'll relax when I hit the goal. I'll celebrate when I finally make it. But here's the problem. When you finally get there, when you finally hit that milestone, you don't celebrate. You don't relax. You just move the goalpost. You find the next thing to stress about, the next problem to solve, the next reason to delay your happiness. And before you know it, you've spent your whole life chasing a finish line that keeps moving. That's what guilt does. It convinces you that happiness is something you have to deserve, but you don't. You deserve it just for being here, just for trying, just for not giving up. So where do you start? When everything feels heavy, when happiness feels impossible, where do you even begin? You start small. So small it almost feels pointless. But it's not. Because small wins create momentum. They remind your brain that good things are still possible, that life isn't all pain, that you're still capable of feeling something other than stress and exhaustion. And those reminders, as tiny as they seem, are what keep you going. Maybe it's taking 5 minutes in the morning to sit with your coffee without checking your phone. Maybe it's going for a walk and actually noticing the sky instead of being stuck in your head. Maybe it's putting on a song that used to make you feel alive and letting yourself feel it again. These aren't solutions to your problems. They're not going to fix what's broken, but they're going to give you a break from the weight. They're going to remind you that you're more than your struggles, that there's still a version of you that knows how to feel good, and that version, that part of you that's been buried under stress and survival mode, needs to be fed, needs to be reminded that it still exists. And here's what happens when you do that. When you start intentionally creating moments of happiness, even small ones, your perspective shifts. You start to notice things you've been ignoring. The way sunlight looks in the afternoon, the way your favourite food tastes when you actually pay attention, the way it feels to laugh, really laugh, for the first time in months. And those moments don't erase the hard stuff. They don't make your problems disappear, but they balance the scale. They remind you that life isn't all bad, that even in the mess, there are still things worth appreciating. And that shift, that ability to see the good alongside the hard, is what keeps you from drowning. Most of the suffering we experience isn't from what's actually happening. It's from the story we tell ourselves about what's happening. You didn't just lose a job. You failed. You're not going through a breakup. You're unlovable. You're not facing a setback. You're cursed. And those stories, the ones we create in our heads, they make everything worse. They turn a temporary situation into a permanent identity. They turn a bad chapter into a bad life. And the longer you believe those stories, the harder it becomes to see a way out. But here's the thing about stories. You're the one writing them. And if you can write a story that destroys you, you can write one that saves you. You can take the exact same situation and tell it differently. You didn't fail. You learned what doesn't work. You're not unlovable. You're just not compatible with that person. You're not cursed. You're being tested. And I know that sounds like semantics, like I'm just playing with words. But words matter. The way you frame your experience shapes how you feel about it. And if you keep framing everything as evidence that life is against you, that's all you'll see. But if you start looking for the lesson, the growth, the opportunity hidden in the pain, you'll find it. Not because it magically appeared, but because you started looking for it. This doesn't mean pretending bad things aren't bad. It doesn't mean toxic positivity or fake gratitude. It means choosing a perspective that doesn't destroy you. It means telling yourself a story that allows for the possibility of things getting better. Because if you don't believe things can get better, they won't. Not because the universe is punishing you, but because you'll stop trying. You'll stop showing up. You'll stop doing the things that could actually change your situation. And that's the real danger of a bad story. It doesn't just make you feel worse. It makes you give up. Pushing yourself to be happy when life is hard isn't about feeling good all the time. It's about refusing to let the hard times steal every good moment. And that takes discipline. Real discipline. Because your brain, when it's stressed, when it's overwhelmed, wants to focus on threats. It wants to scan for problems. It wants to prepare for the worst. That's survival mode. And survival mode is useful when you're in actual danger. But most of us aren't in danger. We're just stressed. We're just tired. We're just dealing with life. And if we stay in survival mode too long, we forget how to live. We forget how to relax. We forget how to enjoy anything because we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Breaking out of that mode requires intention. It requires actively choosing to focus on something other than what's wrong. And that's hard. It feels unnatural. It feels like you're ignoring reality. But you're not. You're just refusing to let reality consume you. You're creating space for joy even when joy doesn't feel justified. And that space, that intentional break from the stress, is what keeps you human. It's what keeps you from becoming bitter, cynical, numb. Because those things, bitterness and numbness, they feel like protection. They feel like armor, but really they're just another kind of suffering. And they don't make life easier. They make it emptier. So you build habits around joy. You make it non-negotiable. You schedule it like you schedule a meeting. You protect it like you protect your sleep. Because if you don't, life will fill every second with stress and obligation, and you'll wake up one day realizing you haven't felt good in years. And by then, it's so much harder to get back. So you start now. You do one thing every day that makes you feel lighter. One thing that reminds you why you're still here. One thing that has nothing to do with productivity or progress or proving yourself. Just something that feels good. And you do it even when you don't feel like it. Especially when you don't feel like it. Because that's when you need it most. Here's something no one talks about. When you start prioritizing your happiness, people become uncomfortable. Because they're used to you being available. They're used to you carrying their problems. They're used to you putting everyone else first. And the moment you start setting boundaries, the moment you start saying no, the moment you start protecting your peace instead of sacrificing it, they'll accuse you of changing. And you have changed, but not in the way they think. You haven't become selfish. You've just stopped being self-destructive. And there's a difference. You can't pour from an empty cup. Everyone knows that phrase, but most people still try to. They drain themselves trying to help everyone else and then wonder why they're falling apart. And the truth is, you can't help anyone if you're barely surviving yourself. You can't be strong for other people if you're weak. You can't lift others up if you're drowning. So protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's necessary. It's the foundation of everything else. And if people can't understand that, if they blame you for taking care of yourself, that tells you everything you need to know about their intentions. And protecting your peace doesn't mean isolating. It doesn't mean cutting everyone off. It just means being selective. It means choosing relationships that add to your life instead of draining it. It means saying no to things that don't serve you. It means walking away from environments that make you feel worse. And sometimes that's lonely. Sometimes That means losing people you thought would be around forever. But it also means making space for people who actually care, for people who want to see you happy, for people who support your growth instead of resenting it. And those people, the real ones, they're worth the wait. The hardest part about pushing yourself to be happy isn't the external stuff. It's not the circumstances or the obstacles or the people. It's your own mind. Because your mind, when it's been in pain for too long, becomes comfortable there. It knows how to be sad. It knows how to be anxious. It knows how to expect the worst. And when you try to shift that, when you try to focus on the good, your mind fights back. It tells you you're being naive. It tells you you're setting yourself up for disappointment. It tells you that hope is dangerous. And if you listen to it, you'll stay stuck. But you don't have to listen. You can acknowledge the thought without believing it. You can hear the voice that says, "This won't work," and still try anyway. You can feel the fear that says you'll just get hurt again and still open yourself up to possibility. Because your mind is trying to protect you. It's trying to keep you safe. But safety isn't the same as happiness. Safety is staying small. Safety is avoiding risk. Safety is never trying anything new because you might fail. And that's not a life. That's just existence. So you train your mind. You teach it that good things are possible. You show it as evidence. Every time something goes right, no matter how small, you acknowledge it. You celebrate it. You let your brain register that happiness isn't a fluke. Those good moments can happen, that life isn't only pain. And over time, your mind starts to shift. It starts to look for the good instead of only the bad. It starts to believe that things can get better. And that belief, that quiet hope that starts to build, is what changes everything. Because once you believe things can improve, you start acting like they can. And when you act like they can, they do. And here's the part most people miss. Pushing yourself to be happy when life is hard doesn't mean the hard stuff goes away. It doesn't mean you stop struggling. It doesn't mean life suddenly becomes easy. It means you stop letting the struggle define you. You stop giving it all your attention. You stop letting it steal every moment of peace you could have. And that shift, that ability to hold both the hard and the good at the same time, is freedom. Real freedom. Because you're no longer at the mercy of your circumstances. You're no longer waiting for life to give you permission to feel good. You're taking it. You're creating it. You're deciding that no matter what happens, no matter how hard it gets, you're going to find a way to smile anyway. And that's not a weakness. That's not denial. That's the strongest thing you can do. Because anyone can be happy when life is good. That doesn't take effort. But to be happy when life is hard, when everything's falling apart, when you have every reason to quit, that takes courage. That takes discipline. That takes a level of self-awareness and emotional control that most people never develop. And once you do, once you master that ability to find joy in the middle of chaos, nothing can break you. Not failure. Not loss. Not disappointment. Because you've learned that happiness isn't something life gives you. It's something you give yourself. And no one can take that from you. And that's when you realize the fight was always worth it.